Obviously, there are a lot of things that I could go over for the title of How to Auto Chess. I decided it would probably be best to go over general strategies to play proper auto chess. So far, we've covered the basics in what is auto chess, as well as the classes and races in who is auto chess. Make sure you're caught up with the basics, as you'll need to know that to understand why we're doing what we're doing. With that out of the way, here is How to Auto Chess. This video will outline the general strategies you'll need to be able to approach the game and get a handle on the general framework of priorities throughout the game. First, I'll be talking about the strategies that players focus on all the progressive stages of the game, proper economy and level management, and lastly, I'll discuss different player playstyles. So, to supplement my explanations, I'm going to be splitting the average game into a few different time frames. These time frames will be categorized by different round expectations, but aren't set in stone. For now, I'll label these as early rounds, early game, early mid-game, mid-game, early late game, and late game. You might notice that these rounds are centered a lot around the various creep rounds. It makes it a little easier to keep track of, and you can use the creep rounds to remind yourself of what your priorities currently are and to compare your current strength with your expected strength. Early rounds, you want to be looking for items. Please don't lose to the first few creep rounds. They do a lot of damage and give you plenty of items. You always want to be looking for pairs of units, giving you the best chance for getting 2-star units. And you want to be picking up good early game units so that you can go into the first couple PvP rounds with a little strength behind you. You can choose to put in strong early game units, or you can try to put in strong early game synergies, but ideally you'd like to do both. Examples of strong early game units are notably Skybreaker, Soulbreaker, Taboo Witcher, and God of War for 1-cost units, Swordsman, Ripper, and Hell Knight for 2-cost units, and Werewolf, Dwarf Sniper, Flaming Wizard, Fallen Witcher, and Wind Ranger for 3-cost units. Strong early game synergies are Goblin, Warrior, Hunter, Exorcist, and Demon. You'll notice a decent amount of overlap between these, so ideally you'd like to combine the best of what you're given to use the strongest units with the strongest synergies. Good examples of this are starts like Ripper, Skybreaker, and Soulbreaker, or Swordsman, Red Axe Chief, and Abyssal Guard. So, to summarize, in your first 5 rounds, you want to be evaluating your items, grabbing pairs of units to try and create 2-star units, and grabbing strong units and synergies heading into the PvP rounds. Keep in mind, almost all 2-star units will outclass 1-star units, so consider any 2-star units strong units. After a couple PvP rounds, it's time to evaluate your position within the group and decide on a strategy to best accumulate gold. Your ultimate goal is to reach 50 gold by round 17. Do you have lots of strong 2-stars and strong synergies? Maybe consider emptying your bench and using your win streak money to get to 50 gold as soon as possible. Or maybe you can force leveling up early, like on rounds 9 and 13, to try and push for an even stronger team and access to rarer units. Are you full to the brim with pairs? Maybe consider rerolling a time or two to try and get some of those sweet 2-stars. Have you been gifted plenty of expensive units like knights or druids? Maybe bide your time and strictly stick with your end composition goals to maintain your economy and also work towards hitting synergy requirements like 4 druids or 4 glacier. Are you going into the first PvP round and you still have no 2-stars, whereas every other player has a 2-star? Chances are you have no chance of winning a round, so you might as well do an open fort strategy. Open forting is where you empty your board and invest all of your early game money into developing your economy as soon as possible. Theoretically, you can reach over 50 gold on round 10 if you don't buy anything, so you're basically sacrificing a majority of your health to establish your economy as soon as you can. It's a high risk, high reward strategy, as you can easily end 8th place if you don't stabilize soon enough, but a strong economy and smart money management can let you scrape your way back to 1st place. Near the end of the early game, you should be using the rarer units you've picked up and the units you've 2-starred to start considering what composition you'll be transitioning into later in the game. This is the main objective for the early stages of the mid-game. Your 2 main objectives are to stabilize your economy and decide on your composition. There are a few things to keep in mind when you're deciding. First, you should build yourself a priority list of compositions based both on how strong the compositions are and how comfortable you are playing them. For example, when Feathered Assassin first came into the meta, it was quite strong, but I had no idea how to play them. Because of this, even though it was a good build, it was near the bottom of my priority list of builds. It was only after playing the build a few times and feeling it out was I comfortable in moving it up on my list. This list doesn't have to be on paper or anything, it's just important to have a feeling for what builds you think are the best for you so that you don't get too stuck on deciding your build. Now, after you have that down, you need to be able to adapt to whatever the game is giving you. What items do you have? For example, mages have very little use for items like Frantic Mask, whereas knights have very little use for mana generation items. What are other people going? If you really like hunters, if everyone else in the game is going for Beast Warrior or Goblin Mech, you won't be having a great time. What key units do you have or not have? If you can't secure yourself a 2-star God of War when forcing Divinity Mages, you're going to be having a bad time. Use these questions to adjust your priority list until you can focus on 1 or 2 builds to look into building towards the late game. Keep in mind, this method is just the method I use to organize my thoughts because I tend to psych myself out unless I have a plan. Maybe other players will have different strategies. Now by the mid-game, you'll have wanted to be decided on what composition you want. Take this time to pick up important units you need, maintain your economy to try and hit important level landmarks, usually level 8 for strong builds to reach their spikes in power, and slowly replace obsolete units that you are using in the early game. This means replacing your Skybreakers and Rippers with your Werewolves and Pirate Captains. By the early late game, you should be the level you need to be to fully flesh out your composition and have all the units you need, even if they're 1 star. Remember, a 1-star Tortola Elder that brings you to 6 mages is much stronger than that 2-star Ripper you've been holding onto. In the late game, you want to 2-star all of your units and get your important 1-cost and 2-cost units to 3 stars. You can also continue leveling after that to pick up strong units to give you more synergies or just give you a boost in damage or crowd control that your team needs. Examples of this might be Storm Shaman for a Shaman synergy or CC, or a Tsunami Stalker for some CC. Dark Spirit, Helicopter, and Devastator are all great units to use if you're lacking a bit of damage or need a special type of damage, be it pure damage in Dark Spirit, magic damage from Helicopter, or physical damage in Devastator. In my experience, I've generally noticed 2 major differences between lower and higher level players that can be mended quite easily. First is bringing competent team compositions in to compete in the late game, which I covered a bit in my last video, and the other is proper and optimal economy management. You'll notice that higher level players are almost always above 30 gold, and usually doing their best to stay above 50 gold. It's important to try and accumulate a significant amount of gold as early as reasonably possible, taking advantage of extra gold from win streaking and lose streaking to optimize how quickly you can reach that 50 gold threshold. The reason 50 gold is so important is because it maximizes the income you are getting from interest at the beginning of every round. The difference between getting an extra 5 gold per turn and 0 gold per turn is a lot, but you'll notice a lot of higher level players sitting around 30 gold a lot of the time because the difference between 2 gold per turn and having 20 extra gold to spend earlier is a gamble that higher level players are willing to live with. This level of decision making and judgment comes with experience, so for now recognize that 50 gold is the goal you're aiming for the late game. There are a few aspects to optimizing your economy. This can be split into the early, mid, and late games as well, as there are just a couple of strategies for each stage. In the early game, you want to be spending all the money you have to optimize your chances of getting 2-star units, as covered before. There's always a chance that you roll a pair of a strong unit and you'll be able to grab that 2-star right away. Later into the early game, make sure to start selling off units you don't need and don't see yourself getting to 2 stars. This way you can start accumulating gold for more interest. For the mid-game, you're going to want to be sticking to the interest thresholds pretty religiously. Always aim to have that 0 at the end of your gold count, whether it be 10, 20, 30, 40, or 50 gold. This means selling units to go up to the next bracket, or picking up decent units that you could potentially use later on to go down to the lower edge of your current bracket. The late game is all about determining what time is the best time for spending all that 50 gold to all in and get your team as strong as possible. If you're sitting at a dangerous health level, like anything below 20 to 25, you should be spending your money to preserve your life. There's no point dying with 50 gold, so you might as well spend it all and aim for a slightly higher placing. This can happen as early as rounds 18 to 21, or it could happen as late as a couple rounds before the game ends. Try not to end any game on 50 gold because even if you won, recognize that that lack of strength probably allowed your opponent to live a few more rounds, and look for that Hail Mary piece that could have brought them that win. Just spend your money and do your best to put them out of their misery. As for optimizing your leveling, do your best to level around the 4th EXP rounds. It saves money and gets you your levels as soon as possible. This usually means leveling on rounds 5, 9, 17, and 21 or 25. Lastly, let's talk about player playstyles and the pros and cons of each. Player playstyles vary between players, but can gravitate players towards certain builds, allowing them to flourish in certain metas and struggle in others depending on what builds are currently strong. Players can gravitate towards stronger early game builds or stronger late game builds, they can gravitate towards more flexible builds or more strict builds, and they can gravitate towards build consistency and popularity. Lots of the top players have iconic builds that you'll see them going disproportionate amounts. For example, Vince loves Glacier Knights, PureJune loves Golem Mech, and Fluffy Milk used to love Assassins. I don't really watch him right now, so I'm not sure if he still does. Your personality really goes into what builds you like and their corresponding playstyles. If you love to play super aggressive, spend all your money in the early game, and win streak into the late game, chances are you'd love to play Goblin Mech or Assassins. Personally, I'm really greedy and tend to psych myself out if I don't have a plan. This made it so I love to play Divinity Mage. It was a build that was super limited in unit selection, which helped me to focus, and required a lot of greed and patience to survive to level 9. An easy way to figure out your playstyle and what builds you like is just to play a lot and just see what kind of decisions you make. You might find that you're really hesitant to roll your shop, or you might be super trigger happy about rerolling your shop and things like that. With that out of the way, that was how to auto chess. My next video is going to be where is auto chess, which will be covering positioning your team in general and against notable creep rounds. Make sure to subscribe to see when the next video is up, but until then, thanks for watching and I'll see you guys in the next one.